Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. My name is Tim Wheaton with MMA Sucka, joined as always by the editor at MMA Sucka, Frazer Krohn. Frazer, how are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. We were just talking about quite a busy weekend of fight sports that have just happened, and then we've got quite a busy weekend coming up. So yeah, looking forward to jumping straight into it.
It's tough living in the combat sports world when it's just headline after headline, and it's another week in a row, or it's another week where the bedrock of combat sports has been rocked. And I want to know how it feels living in the fallout that Betch Kohea is still retired. Frazer, elaborate.
It's yeah, it really overshadowed the Fury Wilder fight for me. I just couldn't stop thinking about Betch would have been in there, would have knocked them both out within 30 seconds. So yeah, just I didn't enjoy the boxing at all this weekend.
You know, like the man I wish Bench was in there. But yeah, it was an amazing weekend of fights. I think just an absolute classic in the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder trilogy. Easily the best trilogy of the last decade in boxing. Like I don't think there's any doubt
Sure.
about that. Just an absolutely amazing. I think four knockdowns overall before leading to the knockout. It's an absolute wild ride, a story of a fight. This is the thing when you have long fights like this, 11 rounds. We were going for 12. You get great storylines coming out of fights like this. And then the boxing world, it's not much tidier. As much as we'd like to pretend it's tidy, we know that contracts exist and that bout agreements and rematch clauses exist. So unfortunately, nothing's ever as tidy or as easy as it seems. But I know that you had watched the fight yesterday. Tell me your thoughts. What did you see in that?
Yeah, it was like you say, it was probably the best trilogy that I can remember in boxing for sure. In many years, but it was strange because looking at it from a more sort of analytical point of view, Wilder started well. He did what he needed to do: go downstairs, jab to the body, keep Fury's hands. Sort of, we know Fury's got great head movement, but you can't move your body as well as you can move your head. Everyone knows that. So he was attacking the body with jabs in the first round, but then after the first round, Wilder just completely went away from that, and he was obviously going downstairs to eventually set up the big right hand upstairs, and it never really came because it didn't come as a result of him. We know that he landed the big right hand in the fourth, which led to the first knockdown, and then the second knockdown was more of a sort of a fallout from the first knockdown. Fury didn't have his legs underneath him, but we heard in the build up that Wilder was going to attack the body. We know that Tyson's got brilliant head movement; he always has done, but Wilder decided to attack the body in the first round, but then after that, we didn't really see him go back to it, which, in my opinion, that's what he should have been doing. It would have set up more opportunities for the head movement. It would have, we saw what Tyson's plan was. It was land a combination, and if he doesn't feel confident enough to get out, clinch. That's why we saw so much clinching in the fight, and that wore Wilder down. Now Wilder could have wore Tyson down by attacking the body and keeping up the body, but he sort of went away from that, which is, in my opinion, strange. It's like he just dropped his tactics straight away, which it's a shame to see because it could have made for an even more entertaining fight if Tyson would have gassed out a little bit more like Wilder did. But overall, I think it's a brilliant performance from Fury. He did what he had to do, and obviously we saw him get the victory in the 11th.
Absolutely amazing. And it's hard to talk about the performances because I mean, a different person, Wilder won this fight, right? Like it just takes Tyson Fury staying down for this fight to
Yeah.
have a different conversation coming out of it. And we weren't very far out of that. He got knocked down twice in this fight off of extremely hard shots, right?
Yeah, for sure. It was uncharacteristic of Tyson. We didn't see any head movement from him in the first sort of 5 or 6 rounds. It took him to about the seventh round to get the timing on Wilder's big right hand. That the knockdown, Wilder's knockdown of Fury came in the fourth,
Mm-hmm.
the first one, because Tyson just took one of Wilder's big right hands square on the forehead, and I don't think the weight really made a difference. Yes, he was heavier, Tyson, and as was Wilder, but I don't think just because you're that much heavier, it doesn't mean you go away from any head movement. And after the sort of seventh round, that's when Fury just started to almost coast. He was seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th. From what I remember, I scored them all in favour of Fury because he'd got the timing down of Wilder's right. He was catching them. He was either slipping them or catching them on the gloves, catching them on the forearms. As he was coming in, he was being able to pivot. And what I found interesting for Fury is
Mm-hmm.
he'd throw a combination, and even if it wouldn't land, he'd then switch up and finish off with a jab or a hook or something, just to really sort of pinpoint that exchange of, this is my exchange, I've won this exchange. And that's what Wilder didn't do. Wilder did the sort of flick jab, full jab, right hand, flick jab, full jab, right hand. And that's all we really saw from Wilder in this fight, which is, we thought with the new trainer in Malik Scott, he might have brought a little more, a little bit of something different to Wilder, but it was the same old Wilder. He needs, like he always says, he needs to be good for 1 second, whereas everyone else needs to be good for 12 rounds. But he didn't find that second in this fight. He couldn't find that 1 second where he needed to be good. So unfortunately for him, I'm not really sure where he goes from here, because he's never beating Tyson Fury. Fury's just literally too big for him. There was a 40-pound weight differential. If we compare that to the UFC, you're talking, Charles Oliveira going up against Jan Blachowicz is and we saw even when Blachowicz went up against Israel Adesanya, that where they weighed in the same weight on the weigh-in day, but in there Blachowicz was the bigger man. It makes such a difference in MMA. You can't tell me that doesn't make a difference in boxing as well. But it is what it is. The heavyweight division, is exciting, but I don't know where Wilder goes from here.
I like what you're saying with the body shots as well, because I think what Deontay Wilder, his entire career, we've criticized him, and he started late in boxing as well, so he needed to sharpen the tools that he was good at very quick, and he did that, and it was his right hand. And since then, he hasn't really expanded his tool set very much, and by working the body, we did see he's varying his tool set, and like you said, just kind of wasn't enough. He went back to the same things of just relying on the right hand exclusively. Tyson Fury was the biggest in history that he's ever been at 277 pounds. I think this is only 4 pounds bigger. So at a guy this size, it's not that much of a variance. This is the largest he's ever weighed in. So the official weights. But yeah, at 277 pounds, this is where working the body really comes in handy, because he's clearly a giant man and his cardio can't last forever at this weight. So it's a surprise that his cardio can last that well at 277 pounds. So working the body would have made a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, that's what I would have thought. And Tyson, I think Tyson knows. I mean, he definitely knows, because I know. If I know it, Tyson's going to know that Wilder is dangerous in that mid range. If Tyson's all the way in, Wilder doesn't have a lot of short range power sort of in the clinch. Yes, he can hit you with shots, but he hasn't got that one punch knockout power in the clinch. Mid range is where he's got that power, because he can land the huge bomb that we've seen him land on everybody, literally everybody he's fought. He's landed it on Tyson in the first fight and in this fight.
Yep.
But the sort of when they're further apart, Wilder can land that bomb, but Fury will be backing away unless Fury tries to close the distance, which is what we saw in the 4th round. With he tried to close the distance as Wilder threw the bomb, it landed on his forehead and it knocked him down. If he's rather than short range, if he's at long range away from Wilder, he can be backing away. So as the shot lands, obviously it's landing, but it's landing with a lot less power, because you try and hit something that's moving away from you, you're going to overextend over your lead leg. So landing to the body where he can move his head out of range, or he can move his head. But even working the body in the clinch, there was a lot of times where Tyson was using his size to lean on Wilder. A couple of, and the referee, was letting them work in the clinch to a degree. Yes, he split it up a lot, and the referee was busy in this one, just splitting up the clinch an awful lot. But the odd hook to the body, hook round to the ribs, that would have depleted Tyson's gas tank. Not probably as fast as Wilder's, but Wilder's in there knowing what it feels like to be tired. So why would he try and almost go away from a game plan that saw him tire out Fury by attacking the body, like you say? It doesn't really make sense to me. But maybe Tyson's just got one of those. We saw Francis Ngannou built the way he is with all the muscle on muscle on muscle, but he gassed out really, really quite badly against Stipe Miocic. Now, Tyson, to be honest, doesn't look like Francis Ngannou at all, but he seemingly has a better gas tank than him. Obviously, completely different sports, but the sort of comparisons are there. But I would have expected Deontay Wilder, if you're going on in your training camp, yeah, I'm going to attack the body, I'm going to work the body. And Tyson is what, 6'9", I think.
9. Yeah, he's
So
6'9".
yeah,
He's a
6'9".
big
So
man.
he's got
He's
enough
huge.
body to be able to hit there as well.
He's got enough body. Yeah, you are
Yeah.
right though. It's a funny
So
thing to say, but you're absolutely
work
correct.
it, you know.
It's a
It's
big target.
exactly, and everybody knows you can't block your body and your head at the same time. So, you know, work the body, he knows that Wilder is going to look to land the right hand upstairs. So for Wilder, why not work the body for the first 5 or 6 rounds, you know, work that body, and then maybe if you you know, if it feels a bit alien to you, then just go head hunting. But you've always got Tyson thinking that you might go back to the jabs to the body. And it gets Tyson's hands down, it gets Tyson thinking. Now, it's not going to work with someone that's as smart as Tyson just to go body, body, head, body, body, head. But we know Wilder's got the power to knock someone out. So a simple, you know, straight to the body is still going to affect Tyson massively, regardless of whether it probably won't drop him because, you know, he'll be able to block it a little bit easier, but it's going to affect you. So
what was the thing?
You don't.
Yeah, what was the thing Teddy Atlas always talked about, right? You dig to the body because you're trying to take the foundation out of the house. If you got leaks in the basement, you know, you're not going to be able to use the upstairs kind of thing, right? This Teddy Atlas said this every day to me on Fight Night Round 3.
Exactly. And yeah, it just seems strange for him to have almost like a 3-minute game plan and then completely go away from it, where he then just went back to his normal winging punches, head hunting, and against someone as clever as Tyson, that's never going to work.
And if you want some in ring and in cage examples of what you're getting at with sizes, they're my idea, and I still stand by this, that the peak heavyweight is that 230 to 240 range. Anything heavier than that, you gas out too quick. You know, the guys like Brock Lesnar when Shane Carvin was in his prime, the giant Frank Mears that we saw, they're too big. And then the guys who are smaller than 230, I think are just too small. So, I mean, good examples of this are like Cain Velasquez and Fedor Emelianenko. Both of them were about 230. They were tiny, tiny heavyweights compared to other guys like Brock Lesnar. Muhammad Ali, you want to guess his weight? His like heaviest weight he ever was at heavyweight?
It's got to only be about, what, 230?
Right on the dot, 230, correct. Mike Tyson, what was the heaviest he ever was?
Yeah, not much more, maybe 245, maybe.
He was 239 at his very heaviest weight. So, like, it's not common that big heavyweights are actually that big. Most of these guys are 230, 240. So it's surprising that Tyson Fury, he's a freak of nature. He doesn't look like it in any way, but he's a freak of nature that at nearly 280 pounds, he can still do 11 and a half rounds of boxing. That's
for
fucking
sure.
Insane. That's honestly insane.
Yeah, exactly. And he didn't even look like he was, his punches. You know, we saw Wilder, his punches were labored between 8 and the finish. You know, his punches were labored. He was throwing out lazy hooks and lazy straights and getting countered, whereas Tyson still had the snap on his punches. That, like you say, that is insane for someone that weight, and you know, to be carrying around that frame for the best part of what, half an hour, over, you know, 32 off minutes by the time it had finished, plus all the antics of
the walkouts
ring
and
walks and everything. Yeah, it's crazy. But I think, you know, Wilder, I don't think that's Tyson's optimal weight. I think his optimal weight is probably the Wilder 2 fight, where he's about 270 ish. You know, he didn't look as sharp in this one as he did against Wilder the second time, in my opinion. Anyway, you know, the head movement wasn't there from the start. But I think eventually down the line, if we ever do get Fury versus Usyk, I can see that going very similar to this fight, as far as Tyson will double jab, look to lean on Usyk, double jab, look to lean on Usyk. Usyk's the much smaller man. He's much smaller physically and, you know, height-wise and in weight-wise. So Tyson will be able to double jab, and hopefully Usyk, because he's smaller, will almost look to bend into Tyson and probably work the body. But if Tyson can, that's why, you know, we can't go into it now because that's all we'll talk about. But Usyk's footwork, obviously, we saw him stay off the ropes against Joshua, but if he can stay off the ropes against Fury as well, gives him a much better chance of victory, rather than if he's pushed up to the ropes and Fury can lean on him. It's one of those things where I think he just drains Usyk's gas tank and looks to work work on.
Trying to find his weight because yeah, like you said, so Tyson Fury is 6'9", Usyk is only about 6'3", so he's a big for a cruiserweight kind of range where,
Mm.
and then he might be kind of small for a heavyweight. I'm just trying to find. Usyk came in. He came in at 220. Like he's not a big heavyweight by any
Exactly.
means, right? Like, and I would love to see the fight because it's clearly this is the top guy versus the next top guy. It's very clear. Don't worry about contracts for now. Just this is the top guy versus the next top guy, and for that reason alone, we should want to see this fight. But honestly, Tyson Fury might just be too big.
Yeah, I think that would probably, like you say, if you came in at 230, you'd probably look to put on a little bit of more weight, which would obviously then consequently make him slower, meaning that you couldn't maybe get out of the way of, he wouldn't be able to use his footwork as effectively. But you're looking at 50 pounds. That's the difference between, you know,
Yeah.
again, that's the difference between someone fighting at featherweight and someone in and around 190, or you're
Yeah.
looking at someone, you're looking at a flyweight and then, someone at 160, 170, Kamaru Usman versus Brandon Moreno, it doesn't work. And that's,
Yeah.
that's only 45 pounds. If Tyson even chooses to blow up bigger than that, which, we know that he's capable of because he was over 300 pounds when he was out of boxing, it's interesting, but I think I can't see that fight. I can see that fight being like the Joshua fight where it just won't happen because we know that Joshua signed the contract for the Usyk rematch this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Obviously,
it.
that's it. We saw on the undercard of the Tyson Robert, I think it's Robert Helenius, put in a really good performance, and is now the mandatory for the winner of Joshua versus Usyk.
Okay.
We know that Dillian White, the winner of Dillian White and Otto Wallin in, I think it's December, will fight. It's the next mandatory for the WBC. So that's the next mandatory for Tyson's belt. So you're looking end of 2022, beginning of 2023 before we even start talking about undisputeds, which is a shame. But,
Yeah.
Dillian White's been waiting for 5 or 6 years for a shot at the WBC, and he's not the kind of guy that will stand aside. I can see, I think he handles Otto Wallin quite easily in December, sets up an all British WBC title fight. But again, to be honest, Dillian White doesn't. He's in my opinion, he's better than Wilder, but he doesn't have the skill to go 12 rounds with Fury.
No, that's totally reasonable. It's hard to say. Do it. I mean, you might be able to rearrange a lot of the rankings of this guy probably beats this guy. I don't think any of these guys beat Tyson Fury. Pretty much any of these guys can beat any of these other guys. Like it's a great heavyweight division. It's a really good, like this top 10 is great. But unfortunately contracts get in the way. Like we're very close to an undisputed, and we were close 5 years ago as well. Things were cooking up. They were getting exciting. But you just, when contracts and money is involved, you just can't get anything done, right? Boxing, this is where we actually start getting critical of boxing and its structure of, yeah, these guys are getting paid a lot more. Awesome. Love it. These guys probably made 40, 30 million, 50 million for this fight at least. But we never get the top guys fighting the top guys.
Yeah, for sure. And, that's what we saw. I think it was last week or the week before with Triller after they bought the rights to the George Kambosos Jr. Teofimo Lopez fight. And that's just dropped out. So now it's had to go to the second highest bidder, which is Eddie Hearn's Matchroom.
Cool. Yeah.
You're talking about promotions bidding on fights and then not being able to go through with them once the fights fall off. So, I think it was, I can't remember the figure, but it was an insane amount that Triller tried to buy Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos Jr. for. And where are they getting that money from? They've got to then pay these fighters X amount of million. And now it's just gone to an Eddie Hearn Matchroom card. And he was just because he was the second highest bidder. So, it's one of those where I think with the boxing world, you never, like Tim says, you're never going to get the best versus the best because it's contracts, contract disputes. We should have seen Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua for the undisputed belt, all British clash at Wembley or at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. But, Wilder signed the clause or activated the clause in his contract that saw him get a third fight. And although it expired, what with COVID and everything, he was able to activate that clause. We saw him get beaten for a third time, and we saw Joshua get beaten by Usyk. So, these are the fights that should have happened. Joshua Fury, sorry, and probably Wilder versus Usyk, and it gives him a good opportunity. But it's one of those things where,
as if you just kept talking. Amazing work.
Yeah, no, just saying.
That's how good you are. You're a professional.
It's one of those things where we should have seen Joshua versus Fury, probably Wilder versus Usyk, but because of contracts, the clause in Wilder's contract that saw him get the rematch, even though it expired due to COVID, so he got that rematch, or the third fight, sorry, with Fury. It's not the fight that anybody wanted to see, to be honest. But like you say, contracts are going to be the death of boxing. But luckily, the heavyweight division in boxing is flourishing now. You got plenty of contenders.
Yep, it's looking good. I think you can match up any of these guys, and I think it would be a fun fight. They pulled out Otto von Wilder, Otto from like the bottom top 30s, but any of the guys in the top 10, you can move up, and it would be a ton of fun. So
exactly,
I want to be excited for the future because heavyweight boxing, it's been a while since it's been fun, and it's finally fun. It's finally exciting. And I also brought up, let me see if I can bring it back up here. I closed it a minute ago. The reason I say this is probably the top trilogy of the decade. So looking at the top trilogies in boxing history, I don't know if it even cracks the top 10. This is how good boxing was for so long. You know what I mean? We got stuff like Miguel Cotto versus Margarito. You got like Felix Trinidad versus Vargas, which was just in 2000. You got stuff like Vasquez versus Marquez. You got Morales versus Pacquiao, Timothy Bradley versus Ruslan. Sorry, Eric Morales versus Barrera, Pacquiao versus Marquez, of course, Mickey Ward versus Arturo Gatti, and then Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazer. Does it even crack the top like 10? All of those were like 2000 or earlier, but
yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. It's like you say, the first fight was brilliant. The second fight was a walkover, and the third fight was brilliant.
True.
But at no point in the second fight did I ever think Wilder was going to win. And there was points where I thought Wilder may win in the third fight, obviously after the two Tyson knockdowns and he's always got that one chance. But the second fight, I think almost, as ridiculous as it sounds, almost ruins the trilogy because it was such a walkover. There was no point in that where I could see Deontay Wilder beating Tyson Fury.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, it wasn't a competitive fight. So to be a really truly brilliant trilogy, it almost has to be first fight very competitive. Obviously, they fought to a draw in that one. Second fight has to be very competitive. After the second fight, I didn't need to see a third fight because Tyson had won the first one, but it went down as a draw. He dominated in the second one. I didn't need to see a third fight, but we saw it anyway. So I'd argue that maybe, like you say, in the past 10 years, it's probably the trilogy of the decade in the past 10 years, but all time, I think it would be a hard sell.
Might not even be top 10, honestly, but that's how good the history of boxing was when it's in its prime. And this fight's an example of it. You feel everybody is watching. Everybody's actually watching this fight. People will talk about this fight. People who've never watched boxing in their life are talking about this fight because when boxing's in its peak, it feels so pure. It feels so sport-like. It feels so good. And it comes so rarely nowadays when matchups like this just rarely happen. But speaking of, we got some UFC cards as well. And I know everybody was talking about this fight. Everybody going in on Twitter all day. They were like, I can't believe this fight is the main event. All day people were talking about this fight. And it actually was a pretty good fight. It was a good matchup. Yeah. You and I on paper like the matchup going in. This is a good one for rounding out the top 5 and figuring out who the next title contender is. Both of them were deserving of moving into the top 5 kind of range. Marina Rodriguez outstrikes and outworks Mackenzie Dern. She shows better cardio, better striking, better counter wrestling, better counter submission game. It's an exciting matchup overall, but I think coming away from it, clearly Marina Rodriguez is the better fighter out of these two. There's no doubt after 5 rounds in this fight. Mackenzie Dern, she unfortunately, we like to imagine someone who enters mixed martial arts from a submission grappling background and a very decorated submission grappling background, but they come to MMA and start getting better at striking. I don't think that's the case. She's still doing a lot of basic things in striking that I'm not sure that she's even aware of. Like she puts her feet together quite often. When she dodges strikes, she switches stances just kind of for no reason. And then she often squares up when she's moving in and out of her range kind of thing. So she's doing a lot of amateur striking stuff that if you were a coach, you can spot right away and say, absolutely don't do that. She's switching. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I was just on that, like you say, like a coach could recognize. Jason Perillo, her coach, literally, as they went to the corner cam, I can't remember what round, maybe the third or fourth round, he was saying, look, don't look at the floor and don't close your eyes. That was in the round.
Don't close your eyes.
Yeah, don't close your eyes and don't look at the floor when she's throwing strikes. Now, you can't get to the top 5 of division, in my opinion, doing that. And she has done. And that is just a detriment to her ground game. But like you say, that's something that a coach can see and coach can tell. But if Perillo's seeing that, Marina Rodriguez's coaches are seeing that. Marina Rodriguez herself is probably seeing when Dern throws a big overhand, she's almost sort of looking down. She could be looking at Rodriguez's knee just coming ever so close every time, So, yeah, sorry, you were saying, but I just felt that, like you say, if the coach noticed that, Perillo noticed that in the third or fourth round, it's just she's got a very awkward striking game, but on the whole, it has worked for her. So,
yeah, she's managed to rise into the top 10 of the division, but still needs a lot of work to round out her game. I think even going into this fight, her takedown accuracy was only like, let me look it up. I think it was only 10% going in. Like her takedowns were
10%. And
right,
in
that's
this
low.
fight, she landed 1 of 8 takedowns, and that wasn't even the takedown in the or wasn't even. Obviously, the fight got to the ground in the second, and she controlled it for best part of 4.5 minutes.
That's true. And when this is the thing, when she was on the ground, she probably almost finished the fight.
For sure. And there was a lot of talk on the broadcast about, I think it was Felder was saying, I think that's probably a 10-8. I think that's probably a 10. I didn't score it a 10-8 myself because there was transitions in there when Rodriguez had submissions that she was looking to threaten off her back. Yes, she was off her back and she was mostly defending. There's no denying that. You can't deny that she was mostly defending, mostly just trying to be sensible enough to keep herself out of danger. But she threw up the odd submission and she was constantly working to get back to her feet. Now you could argue that the third round was a 10-8 because Dern threw absolutely nothing at Rodriguez. So how's that not a 10-8? Just because it's on the feet doesn't mean that it can't be a 10-8. And but Dern was one of it. And this is what we said last week. People need to start listening to us and taking on board what we say. Dern's takedowns are not good, especially when she's in the middle of the octagon. And when she did blitz and rush Rodriguez, she managed to get to the fence, and that's when she managed to work the takedowns, the hip throws, to grab onto a single leg. But her straight up wrestling takedowns are not very good. And, that shows in the fact that she was 1 of 8 on takedowns. And it shows that Perillo was telling her, you need to go twice. So throw your hands to almost get into range, then throw your hands to get into the clinch is what her game plan was. So she has to go twice. So throw the hands, throw again. Then you obviously close the distance with Rodriguez. But she wasn't being able to do that. She was throwing, and she wasn't throwing again, or she was throwing to get into range with Rodriguez. She was doing it from too far out, so Rodriguez was able to circle either left or right, just out of the way of Dern's sort of blitz attack, which I don't want to call it amateurish because, she made it to the top 5, but she's made it to the top 5 because her ground game is elite and unprecedented in the division. But you can't win titles with just a ground game.
And of course, Mackenzie Dern, she's not a black belt in the way that I think of like Rashad Evans as a jiu-jitsu black belt. She's like a mundial. She's a World Cup jiu-jitsu. She's an ADCC world champion multiple time over. She is very good at jiu-jitsu. It's a matter of her getting there. And I think her takedowns are so telegraphed. Marina Rodriguez defended or just even stepped out of the way. A lot of the takedown attempts didn't have to be defended because she just moved the position. And that's really good. That is some good fight awareness. She just cut an angle off, walked out of the way. but that doesn't bode well for Mackenzie Dern, where like your takedown setups are so obvious is the problem, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think she takes a major step backwards after losing this fight. I think, the experience of going 25 minutes is it can't do her any harm. Yes, she lost, but it can't do her any harm going 25 minutes. But I think what people will see is that she does gas out ever so slightly going deeper into the round. She was tired going into the fourth. She was tired going into the fifth. And
Very,
when she
very
gasses
much.
out, she comes desperate on the takedowns. Now, the takedowns aren't good when she's fresh. So when she's tired, they're definitely not good. And her hands drop a little bit more when she's tired. And like I say, I don't think it will do any harm her. Like, it can't do any harm her going 25 minutes. But what will do her harm is now opponents will look and see, look, she is quite literally just a jiu-jitsu girl. I can stand with her and it won't be a problem. So unless she fights another girl who focuses on her jiu-jitsu, like a Claudia Gadelha next, which I think would be a good fight because, they're both fairly rudimentary in the stand-up and they're both solid jiu-jitsu competitors. But Claudia Gadelha, I don't think has got the striking to dominate Mackenzie Dern on the feet. So at some point it will get to the clinch. It might get to the ground, and then it'll be a good battle on the ground. But if she fights for example, if she would have won this one and then gone on to fight a Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she would have got battered. Like Jędrzejczyk would have dominated her, in my opinion.
I bet, no doubt. Young Jacek is so far ahead of the pack when it comes to striking. And people after this fight did say, let's set up Marina Rodriguez next. My suggestion was Yan Xiaonan. She doesn't have a fight lined up. She's she's a striker. She's a volume striker. It would be a really fun fight. A lot of people were saying Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Joanna wins that fight easy. Like even Marina Rodriguez, as impressed as we were with her striking, it clearly slows down over 5 rounds, which Joanna is the same over 5 rounds. If you're not going to be bigger than her, if you're not going to be faster than her, she's going to pick you apart from range. She's going to strike in between your striking combinations. She trains under Ernesto Hoost, and she shows it. She throws the same combinations that she does. She is a better striker than anyone outside of the top 2. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be tough. I think if you want to keep Marina Rodriguez fresh for a title, she probably needs a Yan Xiaonan wins. But either of these girls absolutely loses to Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I do agree. I think Joanna's the better striker, and we've seen Joanna's losses have come against Rose, where obviously it was more of like a flash knockout in the first fight, and then she was just well dominated on that sort of almost. I remember watching the build up to the second fight, and they're saying Joanna fights on the beat, so she'll be in and out, in and out, and it'll be the same beat, and then she'll throw a shot, and then she'll be back on that beat of sort of in and out.
Yep.
When she fought Weili Zhang, Zhang's got the power to cause Joanna problems. When she fought Shevchenko's got the power, the speed, the size, the wrestling. I think Shevchenko, is just a better all-round fighter. Now Rodriguez, she's not a better striker, but she is a very good striker. But fundamentally, she doesn't have the power, I don't think. Yes, we've seen her knock out Amanda Ribas, but she doesn't have the power to really trouble Joanna. And I think that's what you need to face Joanna is to catch her with a shot and to rock her, to make sure that she is a little bit hesitant. We saw it in the Weili Zhang fight. Zhang caught her a lot, and she was hesitant to then close that distance and get sort of in an exchange in the pocket. I don't think Rodriguez has got a great sort of wrestling base. She'd probably be the slightly bigger girl going into the fight, but I don't think she's no bigger. That her size wouldn't be too big an advantage going into that one, because she'd probably be the slightly bigger girl on fight night by a few pounds, but it's not going to make an awful lot of difference. I don't think, especially in the striking range. If it gets into the clinch, it might make a slight difference. But, I'd book that fight. I think the Yang Xiaonan fight does make sense, but we saw her well dominated last time out against Carla Esparza. And, or even the Carla Esparza fight, Esparza arguably should have got the title shot next month. I think
she should have. Absolutely.
It is next month, yeah. So she should have got the title shot next month, and she didn't. So have a final eliminator. Rodriguez, who's on, I think, a 4-fight win streak, rematching Carla Esparza, who's on a 5 or 6 fight win streak. It makes sense. That makes the most sense. They're 2 fresh girls in the division. because at the moment, if you think about the strawweight title, we've seen Joanna versus Rose, Joanna versus Rose, Rose versus Andrade, Andrade versus Wiley, Wiley versus Rose, Wiley versus Rose.
Yes.
We need some new blood. We need some. Yes, Carlos Esparza has already competed for the title, but that was 2014, maybe.
And they were different fighters altogether by that.
Completely different fighters. Rodriguez is
Yeah.
new to the division, as far as the title pitch is concerned. And then further out, we've still got Yang Xiaonan, we've still got Mackenzie Dern. These girls are still coming through in the division who are going to be able to make a run at the title. I think of it, Mackenzie Dern's only 26, 27, I think. So, you know, she's still got a prime to come. And let's be honest, she's still young as far as MMA experience is concerned. You know, she hasn't had a lot of MMA fights still. I think she only really made the transition, I think, when she was fighting on the regional sort of scene. She got away with not having very good striking because she was so good in jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
And now, you know, she's only had 13 MMA fights and made the transition over to MMA in 2016. So she's the best part of 5 years into her MMA journey. But she's, you know, we've seen Cyril Gane. Yes, he's only new to MMA. Francis Ngannou, he's new to MMA. But that's in a heavyweight division where quite literally, if you have power, you can win a fight. Now, these strawweight girls don't always have the biggest power, which is why they can't just, you have to be good for 15 minutes in strawweight, or 25 minutes in this case. Whereas we saw with Ngannou, he was able to, I can't remember who it was he fought, but he managed to power a Kimura to the floor and get the tap, you know. And that was in, I think, his second UFC fight. He was able to do that. And, you know, there's no great actual skill behind that. So, sorry, no, it was in his fourth UFC fight. It was against Anthony Hamilton. But he was able to just, from the clinch, just power a Kimura to the floor and lock it up. There wasn't the greatest technique in that move at all. But because of his strength and his power, he got through. And that's what Mackenzie Dern can't rely on.
Ronda might be the better example of just like,
exactly, she's
in one area, she's so far ahead of everybody else that the weaker areas don't matter, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, we saw her vastly outstruck on a number of times against, you know, Alexis Davis. She just ran in, got straight into the clinch, hip throw, knocked her out with the hip throw, and then a little bit of ground and pound and sort of finished her off and put her out cold. But that was Ronda being able to, you know, yes, she's got a big ego and everything, but I think that was her saying, look, I know I'm not the best striker, so I'm going to get in there and I'm going to close a distance instantly. And as soon as I get my hands on you, if I get my arm around your back, you're going to the floor and you're in my world then. And that's her accepting, you know, I'm not the best striker in the world, but I'm working my way into the clinch. I'm doing just enough striking to, I mean, how many times did we see Ronda Rousey throw a kick? Probably. I personally can't. Yeah, I cannot remember a single time where we saw Rousey throw a kick with the intention of it landing.
Yeah,
she threw a kick more to get herself into range, to get herself into the clinch, and that's what Dern needs to do, you know. And it's what's obviously Pereira is working on it with, is striking to get into range, striking to sort of flurry, and then into the clinch. And she needs to work on a wrestling takedowns in the open, but like I say, she's still young. She's still only, you know, she's 28, so she's still got 5 or 6 years at the top of the division in what is an exciting division. But I think Saturday night really showed that she's nowhere near the level of hanging with the best just yet.
Yeah, that's women's strawweight will continue to be exciting, and we have some new entries in there. But I do agree with you. She's so focused in one area. She really does need to work on some others. Also on the card, Randy Brown living up to some of his potential that maybe we'll never see. I don't know, but he wins as a decision. Also, Agapova got a very quick, like you said, knockdown into submission in the first round. Lupi Godinez, friend of the owner of the site, got a first round armbar submission. And it was quite impressive too. It's not often. We don't see arm bars like we used to, right? We're not living in the Matthews era where people have no idea what an armbar is, or something like that. But everyone knows how to defend an armbar. So when you get one, it looks awesome.
Yeah, it's. I can't remember one of the last sort of quite honest like arm bars as you drill an arm bar with the arm coming straight across the chest.
Yeah,
you've locked your legs over and you're sort of almost pinning the base of your opponent down to then extend the arm, and then you flick your hips up obviously to hyperextend the elbow. We don't see that too often because people are now drilled in, rolling out of it or managing to keep their hands locked, or we see people going for an armbar and just quite honestly just slipping off because they've gone for it. And we saw Mackenzie Dern try and set one up. She was crawling up the body of Rodriguez, and she was in a really high guard, but obviously trusted her squeeze with her legs to stick in her guard.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't see that very often. And it was, to be honest, it was nice to see a straight armbar finish. But for me, you mentioned it. I think the Agapova finish was the best on the card.
Yeah,
she dominated throughout, and I picked her in our staff picks, which I was one of the few to actually do so, because she's good. She won her first fight, I think, by a finish against Hannah Cyphers, I think it was. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then let's be honest, she won her second fight as well. So, so it was Hannah Cyphers. She finished it with a rear naked choke. She was dominating the second fight against Shayna Dobson until she gassed out, and that is her own problem. And I'm not trying to make excuses for her, but she had no respect for Shayna Dobson, dominated her, and then gassed out. And she deserved the loss because you can't go into a fight thinking that you're going to finish it within a few minutes. She didn't, and she paid the price. This fight, she was measured. She was battering Mazzo from start to finish, and then the finish was phenomenal. She landed a big right hand. Mazzo dropped. Instead of even attempting, she didn't throw a single strike. It was just bang straight into the neck, and the tap came. Because if you think you've just had your head absolutely scrambled when you get knocked down, you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are, and you're almost expecting to be sort of covering up to defend ground and pound, but then you just get your neck taken and you tap straight away. And I think Agapova's gonna have a huge future in the division because she is that good, and we just need to see a little bit more of a defensive wrestling to really know what her game is all about. But if she shows that in the next fight or the fight after, I think we got a real contender on our hands at 125.
And I think it's time that we have some new contenders at 125. Tatiana Suarez is taking her damn time getting back to us. However, we got a really lame card coming up. And I'm going to use statistics here to prove my point. I think this might be the worst card upcoming in UFC history. We got Andrei Arlovsky in the co-main event, Aspen Ladd versus Norma Dumont. Aspen Ladd just screwed up her weight cut, 2 weeks ago? She's going to fight Norma Dumont. Yep, both are on a win streak. Very good. But I have the weakest cards in UFC history right here in front of me. You can tell me if this card upcoming is better than any of these cards. UFC Fight Night from 2018, Volkan Ozdemir versus Anthony Smith. Is this worse or better?
I think it's the main event alone is worse.
That's okay. So that is according to the Dwyer score from I think it's from Everlast, but I think that is the weakest card in history. We also have Yair Rodriguez versus Jeremy Stevens. That might be a better one. Holm versus Kohara, Mauricio Shogun Hua versus Brandon Vera. This Aspen Ladd.
The Holm versus Kohara fight, I think, was in China or somewhere
like that. Yeah.
So maybe that was more, the undercard on that was maybe more sort of adapting that to how when they fight in London they have British fighters, if they fight in China they have these Chinese fighters, so it was just adapting to the audience. Now this is, from what I understand, is in the Apex. And even when it was before Holly Holm had fallen out and Aspen Ladd had filled in, that doesn't help the undercard at all. Like you say, Andrei Arlovsky's in the co-main event, which that's dicey. And you got Jim Miller.
On the main card still.
I mean, if you look further down the card, there's some not too bad fight. Brandon Davis is on the card. Ludwig Klein is on the card.
Julian Marquez, always very exciting. Julian Marquez, right? Like you said, there's some good ones here, but this might
Roberts is back, which I'm excited for. But
This might be the worst card in history. In terms of, so
Yeah,
if you saw this exact card on Bellator, you would think, I'm not going to watch that. If you saw that exact main event
yeah,
on Invicta, you would think, that's not bad. I'm not going to watch that. But this is a UFC a main broadcast on ESPN. you
yeah.
know?
It's it's rough for sure. And this weekend's was not much on paper was not much better. Randy Brown versus Jared Gooden as a co-main event is
Eh, yeah, two
not a
guys
co-main
outside of
event.
the top 15, right? Yeah, not amazing.
Yeah, but call me boring. I'm very excited for this main event. I'm a massive Norma Dumont fan. I think she's really, really good. She dominated Felicia Spencer last time out.
Mm-hmm.
And she also got the victory over Ashley Evans Smith at a bantamweight, I think it was. Yeah. So, I'm a big fan. I don't think she should be anywhere near headlining a card after a UFC record of 2-1. Don't get me wrong, but I think she's good. Aspen Ladd, I've always been a fan of Aspen Ladd because she's a savage. But what's she doing? She's her last 4 bouts have all been cancelled, not through fault of her own. The last time we saw a fight was December 2019.
Mm-hmm.
But then she had a fight with Juliana Pena cancelled because of injury for Pena. Then she torn her ACL and MCL. And then Macy Cheerson had an injury. And then obviously last week, Aspen Ladd, fell ill after the weight cut. She's now obviously fighting up at 145 to face Norma Dumont. I'd assume that it's a 145-pound fight.
Oh, let me actually check. You might be wrong about that. Featherweight, yeah, 145. Yeah, you're correct. Absolutely correct.
It
yes.
was flat when Dumont was fighting home. Yeah. Yeah. So that was obviously she's just filling in for Holly Holm, who. But what is a win for either girl? They don't get a title shot off the back of this because, I mean, why would you? You're fighting. If you're Aspen Ladd, you're beating a girl that's 1-0 at featherweight, and if you're Norma Dumont, you're beating a girl that's never fought at featherweight.
Yeah.
In the UFC, anyway. That isn't Amanda Nunes form, and a win over Holly Holm for Norma Dumont would have got her probably a title shot because Holly Holm is a reputable name and has fought at 145, and there's no 145-pound division. Megan Anderson's not there anymore. She was the 145-pound division outside of the champ. So, I am excited for the main event. It's certainly not one that's going to get me up in the middle of the night to watch, but
no,
I'm more excited for the Bellator card. The Bellator card is considerably stronger than the UFC card this week.
Man, look at this. We got Vadim Nemkov, the champion at light heavyweight, defending against Julius Anglickas, a guy who's on something like a 10-fight win streak right now. 9-fight win streak at the moment, undefeated in Bellator. He's coming off undefeated 3 wins in the row in Bellator, and they're going to challenge for a title against Vadim Nemkov, a guy who's a combat sambo background. Ryan Bader versus Corey Anderson's on the card. Benson Henderson versus Brent Primus, 2 former champions. This is a great fight right there. So the top 3 on this card is dang good. Yeah, go on.
For sure. Like you say, I'm surprised Henderson and Primus isn't the main event. That's a Bellator main event in times gone by, especially with the 3-round main events. But you've got that, and then you go straight into the next round of the light heavyweight tournament with Bader and
Corey Anderson.
Bader and Anderson, which I think is going to be a really good fight. Bader last time out, I think he was in the tournament against Machida. I mean, that was a little dicey because it's Lyoto Machida in 2021, but it is what it is. But I think Corey Anderson had a little bit of he had the easiest fight in the first round when he fought Yashig Muradov, who he's a good fighter, but you're looking at Corey Anderson, whose Bellator debut was against Malvin Manhoff, and this is going to be his toughest fight since leaving the UFC, and I think it'll show. I think Bader may get the victory here.
No, I agree with you. Ryan Bader's grown a lot. He's gotten a lot better. Corey Anderson has struggled to really be the fighter that he's supposed to be as good as, you know what I mean? In terms of like, he's getting paid a lot more in Bellator, and that's very good. He is still an all-round great fighter. He's a little bit too much of an all-rounder to be amazing in one area. But yeah, Ryan Bader's gotten a lot better, and he continues to improve. He continues to right now actually be in his prime. I think this is a Ryan Bader win, you know?
Yeah, I think he will be able to use his size. You know, he's fought up at heavyweight, obviously in Bellator. He's the heavyweight champion in Bellator, isn't he? So I think he will look to use his size to just get one over on Corey Anderson, and I can see it being a very, very boring fight, to be honest. But you know, neither of them are too elite in the striking range, and then when it gets into the wrestling realm, I think it's also quite even. So they might just nullify each other's attacks, and which would, like I say, lead to a slightly more boring fight. But you know, it is what it is for I think it's a semi-final, isn't it, of the
Yeah.
Light heavyweight Grand Prix, and then in the main event, obviously we've got the other semi-final. I kind of hope Corey Anderson wins, just because we'll get a fresh fight then, Anderson versus Nemkov, because we've already seen Bader versus Nemkov. But I think Nemkov comes through because his fight fairly simply, to be honest. Obviously, he was meant to be fighting Rumble, but that never quite. Obviously, we saw Rumble have to pull out.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, Anglickas, like you say, he's on a 3-fight win streak in Bellator after a win on the Contender Series as well.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't lost since 2016, but I just don't think his level of competition is as high as Nemkov's. You know, Nemkov's fought Phil Davis twice. He's fought Rafael Cavalier. He's fought Ryan Bader, and that's just his last 4 fights. So you're looking at someone who's a higher level competition.
Yep.
And you know, he's going, you know, 25 minutes with Phil Davis. He's finishing Ryan Bader. He's finishing Cavalier. Last time he lost was back again, also in 2016, where he lost a split decision.
Yes.
So I think his experience is just going to sort of pay dividends in this one, and I can see it being a fairly easy night for him.
I agree. Vadim Nemkov, even if placed in this is the thing of the top of each Bellator division, would do fine in the UFC. In that, like, Vadim at worst would be top 3 in the UFC. If not, like, he could be champion in the UFC, honestly. It's the mid zone on every Bellator division that you go like, oh, these guys aren't good. you know?
Yeah, for sure.
We're talking about Corey Anderson's and like Benson Henderson in his 40. Benson Henderson, former UFC champion, former WC champion, real legacy fighter there. Brent Primus, very good fighter, former Bellator champion. Both of them coming off a couple of losses. Both of them were keeping busy earlier this year with submission grappling competitions. Honestly, Brent Primus might just be the fresher fighter, but Benson Henderson is still very good top position wrestler, still extremely good jiu-jitsu. Brent Primus works off of his back very well, submitted Jake Shields I think last year in submission grappling, so it's a good fight to watch at lightweight. But yeah, I think the Bellator 268 card is very good. One Championship is back this Friday with their first strike card. This is probably, honestly, if you're into kickboxing or more, like, this is the best kickboxing card to happen this year. You have Giorgio Petrosian, who 104 wins, 2 losses, arguably one of the greatest kickboxers in history. He's going to go up against Superbon. Superbon is a student of Buaka. Giorgio Petrosian 10 years ago had a draw against Buaka, and since then he's always wanted that revenge. And Buaka's retired; he never came back. But Superbon is a student of Buaka, so it's kind of a revenge fight. And then they're also starting the featherweight Grand Prix here. So whoever wins the featherweight Grand Prix would likely fight Giorgio Petrosian. So it's going to be a very fun little kickboxing card. Anything you want to say on it, or?
No, I think you've pretty much covered it. Like you say, I quite like the story going into it. It was very much like the Nathaniel Wood when he wanted to fight Chito Vera after Vera knocked out Brad Pickett. It was very much sort of avenging his coach. So I think, yeah, you know, having a story, especially in kickboxing, it's more rare to have that kind of storyline going into it, because it's very much he fights him, she fights her, and
Everybody
now you've got a bit of a
everyone.
backstory. Exactly, and it's not. It doesn't feel as much like you need to build yourself up to a position, because you can, you know, we've seen in the world of glory, we've seen Verhoeven fight people 3 or 4 times. We've seen Saki fight people, Badr Hari fight people 3 or 4 times. You know, it's not one and done in the world of kickboxing. It's more like football, where they obviously fight. They obviously play each other once or twice a year. It's almost similar with kickboxing. You know, once every sort of 3 or 4 years, if you're at the top of division, you'll come back round and you'll challenge for the title again, or you'll have that big fight. And it's nice to actually to build a narrative around outside of the sport, as it were, rather than I want the title off you. It's you had a draw with my coach, or I'm a student of the guy that you had a draw with, and now I want to avenge that, and I want to get one over on you.
And a really good example of what you're talking about is in the featherweight Grand Prix. If Marat Jajorian wins and Sidichai wins, they'll fight each other next for the 5th time. Like, he's already lost to Sidichai 4 times, and he's going up against him next round in the tournament. I mean, that's the thing with kickboxing, of like, sometimes those stories don't rise to where they should be, because we pretty much probably know what's going to happen in the 5th fight. Sure. You know what I mean? One guy's won 4 times.
Yeah. It can't be. If it was 2-2, then you've got the storyline around it because it's the 5th and final sort of rubber match. But then it's just a hard sell when someone's 4-0 down. And
so we'll see how
they're only getting older, both of them, aren't they? So it's not like they're bringing too many new skills to the game.
No, and that's exactly, he's fought Sidichai at least 4 times at this point. And also, because I'm going to be on vacation next week, so let's quickly cover off the Glory card, because it was a really good Glory. We had Alistair Overeem versus Rico Verhoeven. This is a retirement fight for Alistair Overeem. He's not getting any younger. He can do all the horse meat that he wants in Glory, fighting in his home in the Netherlands, and then he drops out due to injury. And now we have a fill-in, which it sucks. Like, I wanted to get that, what if Alistair wins? I wanted to believe. What if Alistair wins and then rides off into the sunset with the title? It never would have happened, but what if?
I was going to say, I'm glad that you said that, because I like the fairy tale of Alistair Overeem winning, but I think Rico Verhoeven is one of the best combat athletes in all sports, boxing, kick. But he's not only has he been at the highest level of his chosen sport, but he's lost, and he's come back from those losses and dominated. And he's one person that, yes, he made the transition to MMA, but he had 1 MMA fight, I think, or 1 or 2 MMA fights. And for me, it's a shame that he's never truly made the transition over to MMA, because he's got the size, he's got the power to really, I think, hang with some of the best guys in the. If he fought Francis Ngannou is not looking to take him down. He's not looking to take Francis Ngannou down, but he's got some more superior kicks, and Ngannou's got superior power. That, for me, is an interesting fight. But I think he sort of almost accepted that he's going to be the kickboxing guy. He'll then go into movies and stuff once he retires. I think he's in a few movies now even. So once he fully retires from kickboxing, he goes into these movies, and he never quite takes the MMA route, as it were. But it's a shame that we didn't get him versus Alistair Overeem, because you can always lean on Overeem's past of multi-time world champion, UFC title challenger, top of the tree, to be honest. He's Hall of Fame, Alistair Overeem, without doubt. But it's a shame that he's pulled out. But when it's a completely different training for Overeem, and he's not training wrestling and grappling anymore, or jiu-jitsu. It puts a different kind of strain on his body, which I'm not really surprised that he got an injury from it, to be honest.
No, okay, yeah, and I didn't want to get too technical, but you're absolutely correct in that Alistair Overeem in MMA was actually very good at the kind of clinch and groundwork. Like, he beat guys like that, Vitor Belfort, with guillotines. He was known as the guillotine guy for a long time. His kickboxing career was left a lot to be desired until he really put on the weight and then got good at the clinch. And he was doing double-handed clinch and pulling guys into his knee. And then he was so good at the K1 changed the rules, so you can't do a double-handed clinch when you knee. You have to do a single-handed clinch. And he was so good at that still. But yeah, so he's at range in kickboxing. He's just pretty good. So coming into this Glory fight, it is the same rule of single-handed clinch would only be allowed. And Rico Verhoeven is so good at the Dutch kickboxing style, left, right, and then shell up kind of thing. And he's so big, and I think he would be a lot stronger. He's going to be faster. There's almost no advantage that Alistair Overeem would have in this fight,
Yeah, for sure. And we saw it towards the end of Overeem's MMA career, at least in the UFC. He was never wanted to stay in the pocket. He was very much, we've seen the sort of memes of him on Twitter and going on the internet of him sort of almost running around the outside of the cage away from his opponent. You can't do that in a ring. It's a squared ring for a reason, and it's a lot smaller. And Verhoeven he's quality, so he's going to know how to cut the ring off.
Yeah,
and So Overeem's going to have to exchange, like you said, left, right, shell up and get into range, and then continue to shell up. Overeem wouldn't be able to be able to. I don't want to say run away because it makes it sound like it, but he wouldn't be able to get space and get that distance and reset.
Yeah.
Because Verhoeven would, I think, like you say, he's going to be the bigger guy, and he's going to sort of lean on him almost and crowd him and not allow him that space. And yeah, I think it would have been a long night for Overeem, or a short night, whichever way you look at it.
I agree with you, but instead we get an even maybe, man, I don't want to say worse fight, but so now they got the fill-in, and it's going to be Jamal Ben Sadiq from Morocco, and this guy has not fought since 2018 because he's been in and out of drug suspensions and in court in Belgium. So things are suspicious at best as a late replacement. So I think Rico probably gets a pretty easy win here. And of course, he is a good fighter. Like he won
he holds a win over Rico, I believe, but that was however long ago,
way back in 2017. So it is a nice little rematch there.
And it's two sort of, how we were talking about the Wilder Fury is it worked because they fought each other. They had 2 fights or 1 or 2 fights in between against other opponents. Then they met back up, and then they fought each other almost straight away after. Verhoeven's been active since 2017.
Very much so, yeah. Fighting great
fighters.
Yeah.
And a range of different opponents that bring a different skill level to the table every time. And I think that's just going to pay. You can't just come in first fight since 2018 and compete for a world championship. It's not going to, physically, it's not going to work, and mentally, it's not going to work. He's going to have the pressure, he's going to have the nerves, and he's going to almost have forgotten how to deal with those nerves, as it were.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that's I probably it's in my time zone, and I probably will watch it. But if it wasn't, I'm not staying up for that one. In the co-main event, you got one of the weirder fights of Gokhan Saki versus James McSweeney. What? But James McSweeney, like, what is going on? A UFC reject. He fought like all over and won. He fought in Ryzen and a few other places like this before going into kickboxing now, and he's doing fine enough. But for him to fight Gokhan Saki, even at the end of Gokhan Saki's career here, Gokhan's gonna kill this man.
Yeah, I think it was very much a fight that when Overeem was on the card, they want plenty of eyes on the card for Overeem versus Verhoeven, and then a ride off into the sun fight for Gokhan Saki. And the more eyes that are on the card, the sort of better retirement fight, as it were, for Saki. And now that Overeem's not, it's this fight, and it's a strange him. Yeah, personally, I don't understand it. You can't tell me James McSweeney was the best they could get.
No.
And I don't, no disrespect, but I think Gokhan's just going to first round and absolutely obliterate him, to be honest.
Yeah, even though Gokhan hasn't fought in kickboxing since 2015, his style works very well for aging in kickboxing, and that he fights. They called him a mini Tyson for a reason, because he fought like Mike Tyson. He covered up, he got into range, he worked body and head combinations, and that style still works. You're getting older because speed is less of a factor, and I don't think James McSweeney would beat him prime for prime anyway. We got to get out of here. We're well over an hour at this point. Next week I'm not going to be here, but you're going to be here, so we're covering off all the stuff. We got some fights cards this weekend. Tell the folks, my name's Tim Wheaton. Check me out, Tim Wheaton MMA. Frazer Krohn with MMA Sucka. Tell the folks where they can find more of you.
Yeah, so Frazer Krohn writing on Instagram, Frazer Krohn on Twitter. We'll have plenty up on the site this week. We've got loads of previews and stuff. I'll be doing a preview for the main event of this weekend's UFC, which we've just sort of previewed now, so it might be a bit of a dicey one, but I'll look at some of the stats and figures behind both girls going in, and I hope it will be a good fight, and I hope it'll surprise us both. But last time Aspen Ladd was in the main event, it was over in 16 seconds. She got knocked out, so it's not trending in the right direction just yet, but we'll see.
Cheers. Thanks for listening, folks.
Thank you very much.